I'll tell you, the last time I was at the Rose Bowl, it was pretty epic. Georgia and Oklahoma playing probably the second best Rose Bowl game ever, behind the Texas USC game in 2005. But Georgia and OU go into double overtime. Lorenzo Carter and company blocking a kick. Sony Michel with a touchdown. Jake Fromm holding on the outside. I love that. I love that. I love the Jake Fromm part because I'm sure it aggravates people. But take a look at the video; it's quite funny, and it wasn't holding if you get away with it. Georgia won't be going to the Rose Bowl in 2025 to start the season. Something that was announced on Wednesday. Georgia and the return game from in 2026 has also been canceled, so that series is out. I think I got on my board over there all the future games for Georgia, and it's just like there's no point in having it up there half the time. I mean, if it's not a Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl game at the start of the season or Aflac, whatever it's called now, it might not happen. Here's the other thing though. Why was this game canceled specifically? I'm going to get into that right now. All right. So there's a few different reasons, and I'm going to actually show you something from our buddies at Red Zone. I put this down below, and I'm going to talk over it as we go. This is a Champions football helmet. You can see the tri-blend shirt from our buddies at Red Zone. Make sure you're checking that out today. I got the link. The link will be down below. Okay. One thing to keep in mind in the grand scheme of things here, and I do not think that this is going to take place in 2026 by 2026. However, by 2027, it could be a different ball game completely, and that is a 9-game SEC schedule. So we already know in 24 and 25 that the SEC is sticking with 8 games. We've already got the schedule. We don't have the dates in 2025, but we have the opponents. It's just whoever you're playing this year in reverse, home or away. In 26, though, things could change. You could have a different situation with college football playoff. You could have, and this is what everybody's waiting for, a 9-game SEC schedule. If you have a 9-game SEC schedule, you're already playing Georgia Tech. You're not going to play, at UCLA, or you're not going to play UCLA as well. Like, it gets to the point where you need some sort of, break, letdown, whatever you want to call it, because it gets out of control in terms of how many games you're playing. Like, Georgia's playing Texas and Alabama this season. They will play one of those two probably every year from here on out until 2030, with the exception of maybe one game or one season. I mean, like in 26, it's very possible Georgia does not play Texas or Alabama. It's possible. It's not probable that they'll. I mean, then they'll just get LSU, right? So it's never going to end. I love the people too. I've seen this lately about how Georgia didn't play anybody in 2021 and 2022. I mean, in 21, they beat Clemson, Michigan, Alabama. Just those 3 alone were, I mean, what are you talking about? And then 22, obviously, the game with Ohio State, TCU. I mean, people aren't going to give TCU credit. Well, they beat Michigan, I guess. So it just kind of gets to say, well, the SEC is real. The SEC East is weak. It didn't stop them from winning the national championship 2 years in a row. I mean, like, they beat the Western champion LSU in 22. I failed to mention that earlier. So this whole discussion of that, like, compared to who? Compared to any Big Ten team, and they don't play anybody hardly up there. It's getting better now, but they don't hardly play anybody. But, like, compared to what, Alabama? Alabama's the gold standard all the time. Who do they play every year? They play the same teams Georgia does. They just, they play Auburn every year. They play Tennessee every year. I mean, like, it's just what it is. So, I mean, Georgia's not lost a regular season game in the SEC since the year 2020. So please stop with this sort of false argument. It's so stupid. You sound like a moron when you do that, but whatever. The 9-game conference schedule, if you want inside baseball, here we go. It's not going to happen, I don't think, without a new agreement from Disney. And a new agreement from Disney, I think, I am skeptical of that right now for a lot of different reasons. And, Disney's not getting the SEC on the cheap. They are getting them on the cheap in terms of like CPM, what's called cost per million, or a common viewership number, way of boiling down advertising to whatever it is or was, however you want to put it. They are getting a much better deal than Fox is with the Big Ten. But I think Fox was more desperate at the time, and they were willing to overpay. I think that Disney is underpaying, but I think the SEC is okay with that because they can consolidate everything into one spot. Now, I can report that there's a look-in. So it may be, what is a look-in? I should be more specific. A look-in is where the league and its television partner, or partners in the case of the Big Ten, have the ability to say, okay, we've been doing this in 23, 24, 24 and 25. We're going to look in 26, and then maybe in 27 or even 28, we will go to a 9-game schedule. That's completely plausible right now in terms of what's going on with the cancel. First of all, the cancellation of the UCLA game. Georgia had Ohio State scheduled, I think, for 2018 and 19. Like, these games that are not, Clemson, basically, they're going to get canceled. And it is possible that the Clemson games in the near future get canceled after this game. This is, I can't report this, but this is essentially the return game for the game in Charlotte. So they're playing in Atlanta. They had played in Charlotte, which is Clemson's home neutral. It was as many Georgia people as Clemson. And now we're going to play in Atlanta, which is not going to be nearly as many Clemson people as Georgia. It's going to be 60 to 70% Georgia folks. So that's where we're at with everything. That was a return situation. Clemson and Georgia do have games scheduled for the future. I just don't I don't think Clemson's going anywhere from the ACC. They're kind of they're saber rattling a little bit. We'll see. I am skeptical of that. But leave Clemson out of it. Just say Georgia's playing North Carolina. There's a lot of unknown about the future. And I think if you're Josh Brooks specifically, I would say Jerry Moorhead too, but he's the president. He might not be here in a few years. You do have to give value to ticket holders. That's not been great lately on paper. Now in 25, that's going to be the best home season on paper maybe ever. Just alone from Alabama and Texas coming in. Okay, they got Ole Miss too, but just alone those games, because everybody got used to Tech and Auburn and Tennessee coming. LSU's always a big game in Athens, but those two games are going to be high dollar games in town. Why donate? If you're a ticket holder, why donate when you're not getting the games that you want, when they're playing the biggest games in Atlanta or Jacksonville or whatever? They're not going to play. They're not playing Georgia, Florida on campus. Y'all can get that out of your brain too. I'm not reporting that. I'm just saying they're not going to take millions of dollars of pay cut so they're not playing that. So that they don't play in Atlanta or in Orlando. Orlando, of the two, Orlando's a dump compared to Atlanta. They're not, that's an unfortunate situation. The facility in Atlanta, the city is better in Atlanta. The facility's better in Atlanta. All of that. It's way better in Orlando, Jacksonville, Tampa. It's all better. All of it. You can take Marta to the games. There's a zillion things that make Atlanta better than all the other situations. And that's my sidetrack. But they're not going to have these games on campus. So there's a lot of juggling. There's a lot of balls in there. But this probably relates to, A, do we really want to go to Los Angeles and then they cancel on us the next year? B, because of the Big Ten. Because maybe the Big Ten is going to 9 games and we don't know it, or whatever. Maybe they're going to a higher number of games and we don't know it. I don't know. I feel like the Big Ten would get pressured into that quicker than the SEC would, because Fox really controls the Big Ten in a way that Disney does not with the SEC. Disney has a lot of say, a lot of sway, all that stuff, but Fox literally owns the inventory. That's not the case, as I understand it, with the SEC and Disney. So it's not the same. Fox is a controlling partner in the Big Ten network. That's not the situation with the SEC and the SEC and Disney and the SEC network. So just as an aside, um, Fox, I believe until 29 owns the right all of the rights. Like that's how they got it to NBC and CBS and all this. Those are sub licenses. Those are not, Fox sold those off as I understand it. So the power dynamic is different there. But all of these things could be affecting why these aren't happening. People were always sort of skeptical that this would happen. And I will say that, like, if Josh and Kirby tried to go with another Atlanta game back to back, I just don't. I think at some point people will be like, man, we're playing down there a lot. Like, we want to play down there once, maybe twice a year. We don't want to play down there every kickoff of the season. Like, that's like the power base of the University of Georgia is still in Athens. And even though, and I'm going to mention Brian Kemp. Brian Kemp is the governor. He's not going to be the governor forever, but he's from Athens. And this amount of time, I think you hear from people in Athens. I think the fact that the governor's from Athens area, I think that helps Athens in terms of keeping games there slightly, not a lot maybe. But there's plenty of people. I mean, like Josh Brooks can't go out to eat without going out to eat in Athens, right? Like that's where he goes out. When you go out to eat in Athens, you're going out in Athens. So people want that revenue to stay local. And I think you hear that. But at the end of the day, what was Georgia getting out of the UCLA game? It wasn't more money. It was not more money. What was Georgia getting out of playing that game? What are they getting out of playing Clemson? You notice they've not played on campus, those two, in 10 years. It's been 10 years since those two played on campus. Before that, it had been 13 years. Now they're playing in neutrals and getting paid, $5 million a game or whatever it is. Georgia this season is going to get paid over $10 million, if my math is right, for playing neutral site games. They're just taking the money. Like, they don't have any cost, really. So that's where you're going to see the future go. Georgia's going to play in Atlanta a lot. However, there's still always going to be that pressure to play in Athens from local. I mean, you don't play your biggest game of the year every year in Athens. That literally never happens. So, you're always playing in Jacksonville. So, all of that adds up to where we're at today, which is, what's this going to be like for the Dogs as we move forward? And I think it's going to mean fewer of these cross-country games. And it could mean fewer games against, non-SEC schools. It's very possible. Thanks for watching.